Okay, I think I'll start because it is, as I'd mentioned, I think we have a healthy number of participants also. And I will start because it is a long presentation. Welcome students, welcome parents. I'm just so happy that everyone was able to take, I know 2 hours these days is a lot to ask for, but thank you for taking the time off. And, we'll try to wrap it up sooner rather than later. And I have structured this so that there's enough time between the sections for you to ask your Q&A so that, and we're limiting the Q&A time between sections so that we don't get stuck in the first section. So I will be keeping an eye on time. But welcome, my name is Ramya Murdukuri. I am the College and Career Counselor here at Manthan. And I think 8th and 9th graders, probably I haven't met that many of you, but I will get to know each and every one of you over the next few years. And if there are any 11th, 12th graders, then welcome as well. So today we're going to cover an overview of college options worldwide. This is a question that comes up a lot, especially in 11th grade, when students really seriously start thinking about colleges and what their options are, because these days, many students, especially those like you guys studying in international schools, don't just look at India, though most do look at India in, as a secondary option, even if they're looking abroad. So, we thought in addition to doing it for like the 11th, 12th graders, why not do it a little early on? So even those of you who are in 8th grade can plan your, at least you'll get a sense of what's out there. And I know you won't probably remember most of this. Feel free to take screenshots. We will be, I think we'll hopefully share this as a PDF. There is a PDF version of this, so we will try to share it. So this will focus primarily on costs, even though for India, US, UK, and Canada, which are kind of like the more major the regions that the students look at more closely, I will be covering more of the the way the universities are structured, the landscape, the different options and things like that as well, in addition to the costs. But the focus is really on costs, living costs, what you can do to bring down those costs, either in the form of scholarships and things like that. Okay. Just housekeeping. There's no unmuting, I believe. So please do put in your questions in the chat box. And like I said, after each of the major sections, there are about 4 total Q&A in between Q&A sections that I've accounted for, with 1 at the end. Okay, so these are some of the destinations I'll cover today. Like I said, US, Canada, UK, and India, I will cover in more detail. And the rest we will go over as well, but maybe not in as much detail. Otherwise, we'd just be sitting here forever. Okay, so the first thing is factors to consider when choosing a university, right? And some of this may be obvious, some of this may not be. So obviously, one of the biggest things, especially when you're thinking internationally, is the educational offerings and the philosophy. So in India, till now, and the new education policy is changing it, but till now, it's been very siloed, right? So you apply to a course and that's what you do for 3 years or 4 years. Whereas in a place like the US or Canada, it is much more flexible. You can enter into a course and then you can change your major. You can do a combination of majors and minors. You can, you can apply undecided also and then declare your major after this first year. And things are changing in India as well. And the NEP, if any of you would like to go over it, has a lot of literature spent just on that. So education offerings and philosophy, and on the offerings, one of the reasons also students look internationally is because there are some really interesting courses that are there abroad that simply don't exist in India, right? Or they exist more at a master's level. So even students who are looking at things like astrophysics, yes, they're there in ICER and IISc and all, but at a master's level, it's very hard to find it at an undergrad level. Whereas if you apply to a place like UK or the US, that may be offered as an undergrad option. So educational offerings. The second is the duration of the degree. So some parts of the world, as you'll see in this presentation today, some of them have 3-year degrees, some of them have 4-year degrees. And can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, Ramya, we can clearly hear you.
Okay, sorry, I just wasn't sure. Okay, so the duration of the degree matters, and it's more because also the cost gets cut down, but the other implication is places like the US, if you're applying for a master's, they expect a 4-year undergraduate degree. And so, you do have to keep that in mind when you're applying for 3-year universities. Then, of course, this is, I don't even have to explain, for many people, it is a source of comfort, sending your child thousands of miles away, or for you kids, maybe that's a good thing, you're like, I'm finally free of all this. But, that is something that's a factor either way, right? Working while studying, many regions are very good about this, but, there are implications, and some of them restrict it, some of them allow it, and some of them cut it from the post-study thing. So it's something to keep in mind. Which brings us to post-study work opportunities. Some regions have very, very limited post-study visa that they give you, but some of them, are very generous. So we'll go over those as well. And then other, and this is something I think in a large part, I think parents and students don't look at this closely enough. I think, for them, other becomes ranking, and really it should be so many other factors that are important to you and your family, right? So it's more about, it can be as simple as weather, maybe you just hate the cold, then you won't want to be going and sitting in like northern Canada, or or it could be something as important as safety, right? Safety on campus, safety, geopolitical safety in that region, and similarly politics. These days, needless to say, there is a lot of turmoil. So you look at a place like Hong Kong, sure, campuses are safe, but the broader picture is still very uncertain. So, is that a chance you want to take? And even, somewhere like the US, which typically has seen, so many, like the primary chunk of international education, from India. But even then, last year, it's just been a very interesting and very divisive year. So, those things matter as well. But of course, today we're here to talk about the big one, which is budget, right? When we say international education, the first thing really comes to mind is, okay, it all sounds great, everything else works great, but can I afford it? So when we talk about budget, one thing to keep in mind is the full cost of attendance, right? Very often, and parents probably are more savvy about this, but students will look at the tuition fee and they'll be like, wow, this is great. This is only like, XYZ amount. And then you'll start adding up all the other costs and it can really balloon up. So tuition fee is obviously the big, one of the big chunks of, probably the biggest chunk of your education. Then there are other fees like registration fee. There may be a semester fee. So you have to read through, the fine print for the universities. And of course, the living costs, which include housing, which is the biggest one, and then food, transportation. Some countries expect you to get compulsory medical insurance, which is not cheap sometimes, and leisure and entertainment. And also those small little nitty-gritty costs, which are not actually that small, is, traveling back home once a year or twice a year, studying abroad. Many foreign universities offer study abroad programs. You have to ask them, is it a separate charge for study abroad, or is that included in the fee? Okay, so basically, and we'll see, especially in Europe, this starts to come into play a lot. In some cases, the tuition fee is nothing in public universities, but your living costs are so high that it makes it fairly prohibitive. So we'll see an example of that as well later. Okay, so we'll start with India. A little quiz to wake you guys all up, and you can put it in the chat box. How many institutions in India offer post-secondary education? Is it under 10,000, 10,000 to 50,000? Sorry, I'm looking down here, not because I'm texting, but I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. So does anybody want to put in, or please, everybody put it in the chat box. Okay, greater than 50K, somebody says A, B. Wow, B is the big winner, but actually the way it stands today, okay, it's actually more than 50,000. It is insane, I know. I couldn't believe it when I read it either. And I'll explain how that breaks up in the next slide. But I want to point out to these three pictures here. These are three institutions where our past students are studying in India. Just for those of you who don't know, we've had 3 batches so far. Sorry, this is our 3rd graduating class, this class of 2021. And we had a total of we've had 23 students in the last 3 batches, but this year, for example, we're doubling every year. So this year we have close to 30. Next year we have I believe like almost 60 or so, or 50, I think. So but these 3 institutions, any idea what this top one is, which university it is? Chat box, anybody? It's a private university. All three are private universities. IIT. Yay, Shreya, Ashoka it is. We have 3 students studying at Ashoka. And then this bottom left, anybody, those of you who are engineering, I mean, if you've done, it's an engineering college. Any guesses? Triple IT, IISc, Manipal, close, Tyndall, no. It's a VIT, Vellore Institute of Technology. And the bottom right is, which I won't ask you to guess because it's a little bit, but it's Manipal Srishti School of Design and Technology. So that's a little thing for you. Now, how does this 50,000 number come from, right? So there are central universities, 50 of them, state universities, deemed universities, private universities, autonomous institutes, open universities, standalone institutions, 10,000 of them. And that still doesn't get us to 50,000. So the big one is this whole affiliated colleges, right? 40,000 of them. And the new education policy is doing, one of their big focus areas is getting all these consolidated into larger research universities. And so that should hopefully take that number down to about 5,000, maybe 10,000, and stuff like these 40,000. So confused? Yes. And especially when I try to explain to the kids what a deemed university is, it's, it's nobody is clear about it. So, but anyway, so how do you sift through all this, right? I think there are 4 layers in my mind. So one is, of course, the UGC approval. UGC is the University Grants Commission. Every university and college in India has to be approved by the UGC. So there are fake universities. I'm not saying our kids, thankfully, you guys have me, you have wonderfully educated parents, so you won't have this worry, but, check the UGC accreditation if it's a new institute. Accreditation. So accreditation basically for the kids out here, parents would know, but kids, it just basically means that, is the university performing up to certain standards, right? So all technical institutes in India are accredited by the AICTE. All the medical colleges are accredited by the MCI. So it just says that these universities are at a certain standard level that is expected of them. The next layer of sifting through is really the rankings. And I think, there are various rankings out there. Many of them do, vary. And one thing when you do look at the rankings is also, you will, just make sure you understand the methodology, right? Sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, this is ranked in the top 10, but what methodology are they using, right? Is that ranking, and each of them, at least the NIRF and QS and these guys, they actually put out the methodology. So they'll say in our ranking, 40% weightage is given to this factor, 20% is given to this factor, and then really understand if that works for you, right? So these are some of the things. And then, of course, faculty, infrastructure, placements, student reviews. This is like really the icing on the cake that makes, I think, students pick or choose or not choose a university. And this is where, this is not easy, I understand, but this is where you can look at some of these websites and so on. But we also, now that we have alumni, we do call them into campus. We have virtual sessions with them. We have, we do a lot of universities, right? We bring in a lot of universities. We have university visits. I urge the parents on this call to please attend those, because then you will have a much better sense of what the offerings are. Sorry, India will take a little bit of time. US will also take a little bit of time. After that, I will just speed through it a bit more. Okay, so there are different models of study even today in India. It's no longer as simple as when we applied to college, where it was you go in, you study for 3 years, 4 years, 5.5 years, and you're done. So this is the traditional model. Then there are the new universities like Ashoka, Kriya and all, which even for BSc, BA, BBA courses, they offer an optional 4th year where you can do a thesis or you can add on an additional minor. You can do a capstone project, things like that. So these are typically adopted for that, kids who want to apply maybe to the US or want to get that, major minor combo, or just want to do something a bit more with their in depth with their undergraduate studies. Then there are the models where the foreign university programs are hosted in India. So the biggest example is University of London is doing this aggressively, not just in India, but also in places like Singapore and other places, Dubai. So they essentially in India, there are places like ISBF, which is the Indian School of Business and Finance, and Russell Square College, Amity University. They basically, University of London creates the curriculum and the grading all gets done, the papers go back to them. Everything is, it's almost as if you're studying at the University of London, except the curriculum is imparted by professors here. So the quality of the program you get is on par with University of London, and the degree you get is also from University of London, but you don't have the cost of studying at the University of London. Then there is the global model with part of the program in India. A perfect example is this SPJN School of Global Management, where you do 1 year in Mumbai, 1 year in Singapore, and a third year either, I believe, in Dubai or in Sydney, I think. But it's basically 4 different cities globally. And then there are the half and half programs where you do 2 years in India and you study 2 years abroad. And you get the degree from the second half from the university where you're graduating from. So Manipal ICAS is a great example of this. You do 2 years in India, and they have tie-ups with about 400 international universities, like really good ones too, across the world, US, Europe, Australia. And then you would study your credits get transferred there, and you study for 2 years in that other institution, and you graduate with a degree from that other institute. If you're not able to transfer, then you still graduate with a degree from Manipal. And then lastly, I mean, this is distance learning. There are more online degrees coming up. IIT Madras, I mean, not many people know this, but they have a BSc in data science, which actually is fully online. And I have to fully check what the entrance modalities are. Honestly, I haven't looked too much into it, but there are online models as well that students, maybe students with specific circumstances can look at it. We don't generally encourage that, but it depends on, it's a case by case basis. Okay, so that was all the models. If you guys want to, take a screenshot or whatever, that's fine. This is roughly what the costs break down for, so public universities, for the kids who are on the call, these are universities that are funded by the government, either the central government or state government. And so your examples are like Delhi University, University of Hyderabad, Mumbai University, medical colleges, it would be like AIMS and JIPMER and these guys. And then your private universities, are the ones that mostly come to school. So, for engineering, it will be like Manipal, VIT, Amrita. For, liberal arts and things like that, you have Ashoka, Flame, Priya, Jindal, all these guys, right? Christ, Azim Premji. So this is the cost breakdown. So it starts, obviously it is much cheaper for, at public universities, even for foreign nationals, like AIMS and all these guys. Actually, for public universities, it's a standard of around $75,000. By the way, all the costs throughout this presentation are in rupees and are per annum. So just for a point of, so that it's easier for you to reference. So you are looking, at almost like, if you're looking at engineering, even for foreign nationals, it's 3 lakhs on the upper end for public universities, whereas 9 lakhs for privates. So, and same thing for medicine, it's up to 3 times more in private universities. But obviously, I guess the trade-off there is public universities, it is sometimes, I mean, it is the quality of universities are harder to get into. The cutoffs in some of these places are reaching stratospheric levels, and also there's a lot of reservation which may or may not work for you. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then that's definitely a constraint, right? The open category, open quota seats are limited in all these universities, which is why students really look at privates. So that's kind of the range. Okay, so quick 5-minute question break. You can put it in the chat box. Obviously, we don't have to take the entire 5 minutes, but anything about India before I move to the US? Yes, I think the recording will be made available, I believe. Somebody had asked about that. Any questions on India? Please ask questions, otherwise this is just me talking, which I also don't like that much. Deemed versus private. I think, some of these distinctions are going to go away, but basically, as far as I can tell, it's not, from at least an admission standpoint, there's not a whole lot of difference really, right? I think where it may come into play is more for things like medical, counseling, right? Oh, this is wonderful. So we recently did, Ashoka University had done this conference, and there was like so much of the focus was on NEP. NEP is starting to be implemented. If you've seen, Delhi University is already taking, even Andhra universities, some of them are starting to do this standardization, where they're saying that we're going to get rid of the 3-year degrees and move towards a 4-year model. And the, DU has started, they started with implementing something, now I can't remember, but the NEP is slowly, there is a lot of focus, and there is an aggressive push towards, getting it implemented really. I think the big changes in the NEP are mainly, around, when it comes to college. One is the focus on liberal education. That's a big focus. Then consolidating all these, universities into larger research universities rather than so many affiliated colleges. And for institutes of, for really well-performing institutes, a higher level of autonomy. So one of the examples given is like an LSR or an SRCC in Delhi. Why should they be shackled by Delhi University? Because clearly they are, even they're really a pack apart from the rest, right? So they should really be given more autonomy to upgrade their pedagogy and things like that. NEP has, so to do with NEET and JEE mains, NEP is going to try and bring a more standard entrance exam, so there is that. And also, liberal education, that will affect maybe some of the, the ways technical education is, it'll definitely affect the way technical education is taught in India. It won't be so siloed anymore. They will bring a much more multidisciplinary focus to it. But how that affects NEET and JEE is yet to be seen. But there's going to be more standardization, right, on the exam front, because right now NEET, yes, has become very standardized. But JEE mains, even though it's accepted by many, many, many universities, there are still a lot of private engineering entrance exams out there, right? It's not as standard.
Ramya, can I add a couple of points on NEP?
Yes, please.
Yeah, one is the 4-year degree. All undergrad degrees would be 4 years moving forward. Maybe in a year, 2 years, all the universities will move to that structure. Second, within that 4 years, students can exit after 2 years,
yes,
and get a certificate.
Right.
After 3 years, get a diploma, and after 4 years, get a degree. For people who cannot continue studies for all 4 years, they can move out after 2 years, then take a break for 2 years with the certificate, then
the
come
credit
back and
bank,
join for the degree.
So on, so
they're
forth. Instituting a credit bank.
And a lot of these exams would be more coordinated through the National Testing Agency. JEE and even Central University Common Entrance Test is going to be coordinated for all central universities. Will join that, and that would be a common test. So instead of going and applying for each university separately, like JNU, DU, BHU, HCU, one can just apply once and take an entrance, and that would make it lot more accessible for students in good colleges.
And I think that's something they already have signed up for, right? The central universities have already signed up to follow.
Yeah, that is already in the process. This year itself, exactly. The CU set is starting for all central universities.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to move on, because this brings us to exactly 5 minutes. We will get back to some of the questions, because it's really hard. This is such a wide topic that we could do an hour just on each of these, each of these countries, right? Okay, so again, a quiz to wake everyone up.
Ramya, one question I'd like to answer. There's a question,
yes.
Which top universities or colleges do not consider IGCSE qualifications or Cambridge qualifications? You want to answer that?
Yeah, all of them. None of them don't consider. I mean, the Association of Indian Universities has specified equivalence for the Cambridge curriculum. So it is accepted by everyone. So whether you're going to take the NEET or the JEE mains, or applying to any of the public universities or private universities, Cambridge curriculum is accepted everywhere in India. Okay, so moving on to the US, we will come to some of these questions because otherwise I'll be rushing through the last two slides. So, okay, any guesses here? Which university produced the most number of current Fortune 100 CEOs? So two of these are public universities, two of these are Ivy Leagues. A, B, C, or D, you can put it in the chat box. I wish we had a poll, that would be fun, but okay, I'm getting a lot of A's and D's. Oh, D, D, B, D. Okay, so I guess people are quite savvy here. You would think it's A, and historically, yes, it's A. But in terms of the current crop of Fortune 100 CEOs, it's actually Texas A&M, followed by Dartmouth, and then followed by Harvard. And these four pictures again are places where our students have been placed or are enrolled. So any guesses? Any of them? Bottom left, I think you can see the flag too. It's my alma mater as well. Any guesses? Okay, bottom left is NYU. Top right is University of Washington in Seattle with those beautiful cherry blossoms. Top left, anyone? Because that's a really popular university on the West Coast. Really prestigious one too. Anybody? Oh, I wish Stanford, but we'll get there eventually. But okay, after Stanford. UC Berkeley, yes. So we have a student there who enrolled last year. She got into UCLA as well. But yeah, it's Berkeley. And then bottom right is our students going this year. Many people might not be aware of it, but it's a fantastic university. It's called the Ivy League of the South. It's Rice University in Texas. Okay, moving on. So the US, briefly, there are 4-year colleges and 2-year. 2-year is just an associate's degree. Most of our kids, it's not relevant for them. 4-year colleges, break up into these. So there are specialized colleges, which are kind of like your Berkeley School of Music, or, like MICA, your Maryland School of the Arts, or Rhode Island School of Design. Then there are interdisciplinary colleges, which are somewhat like research universities, but smaller. And then there are small liberal arts colleges, which basically the focus is on only undergrad education and not on, I'm sorry, my son's video is coming in the background. I apologize. Sorry, liberal arts colleges are colleges which only focus on undergrad, and there are some amazing ones. Parents often don't look at them, but you should, I think, because if you look, in terms of both employment as well as kids going on to grad school, these students do far above, the national average in terms of entrances into Ivy Leagues or top 20 universities or doctoral degrees and stuff like that, because the entire focus is on undergraduate education. So professors are teaching every course. The class sizes are very small. So wonderful options. Then there's the model where there are US universities outside of the US. So NYU has a campus in Abu Dhabi, a campus in Shanghai. Northwestern has a campus in Qatar. Yale has Yale NUS in Singapore. So this is called an international branch campus, and we will look at it a little bit when we do Middle East. And then, of course, there are the big research universities that all of you have heard of, right? Like all the UCLAs, UC Berkeley, Penn State, Texas A&M, Austin. These are all your large research universities, both public and private. So if you look at the top buckets, they are all, mostly private universities. And public universities are, your research universities and the 2-year colleges, which are less important for us. So academics, it is a 4-year degree in the US. And I also want to add, kids often ask me, medicine in the US is not an undergrad degree. Law in the US is not an undergrad degree. And business is different. Business it is offered as both undergrad and a master's, but law and medicine are not offered as undergrad. So what you have to do is you have to do the 4-year degree and then apply to medical school and then apply to law school, that kind of thing. So it becomes really expensive. And a note about medical degrees too in the US is that if you're not a US citizen, forget about it, because they have they pretty much dissuade you from even applying. If you look at a website like Johns Hopkins, they'll say, if you're an international student, tough luck. It is highly, and this is one of the main reasons kids, and parents look at the US, is that it's a very flexible way of studying. You can apply undecided, like I said earlier. You can do combinations of majors and minors. You can do transfers. And I think hopefully in the next decade, a lot of that will come in India as well. And in terms of the admissions and also they have some really interesting degrees, right? And courses which are not always offered in India. The US does follow a holistic admissions. What that means is they look not just at your academics, it's not even fair to say, I should have added one more bullet point here saying context, right? I think holistic admissions is not just, okay, you have to excel at academics and you have to do extracurriculars really well and you have to do everything else well. It's more about what is available to you. So the example I give is, a student who has both parents who have done masters or who are at least college educated, a child like that getting a 1450 out of 1600 on the SAT is fine. It's a good score, but the same score, a student sitting in some rural part or in like tier 3 city and with parents who may not have access to that much education, who may not be that well educated themselves, it's more impressive, right? So, and I think that's where context comes in, and US universities, they look a lot at the context, right? And so also in terms of what the school offers, like our school is very different than a school like Dhirubhai Ambani, right, in Bombay. So a kid there taking 10 IGCSEs, and it may not be that impressive, but our school, given what we offer, if it basically matters where you come from and what's available to you. That's basically the bottom line, right? Okay, costs. You'll be surprised seeing that 5 lakh number, but actually, yes, there are universities in the US, especially smaller community colleges. I'm not saying that many people will look at them because there are pros and cons to that. But, there are universities that are pretty cheap. And then at the higher end, it's 43 lakhs, 42 lakhs, which is that $55,000 range. And that's really, I mean, private universities are mostly at that level right now, and public universities are somewhere in the 40,000 range, which is about 30 something lakhs, right? And then your living will also, there's not as wide a range, but this is still, wide enough range. So your living costs in a place like Indiana, if you go to Purdue, are going to be almost like half of that if you're going to a place like MIT or NYU, which is, or like Boston University, right? Because those are urban campuses in the middle of a really expensive city. So the living cost also matters a lot over there. US is by far the most generous with aid, despite the heavy sticker price. But and this is, by the way, I mean, we do an entire session just on this with the 12th graders. So there are a lot of considerations, right? So if you're looking at the US, so one is, yes, there is aid, and aid is usually, there's need-based aid and merit-based aid. Without going too much into these things, basically, need-based comes down to your income and your family's assets. And merit-based is, of course, just based on your, how you've scored in your academics. There's a concept of, so even need-based, it's not as simple as saying, in India, sometimes like places like Ashoka or Kriya, they'll say, if your family income is, between, if it's under 25 lakhs, we'll give you X percentage. If it's between 25 and 40 lakhs, we'll give you Y percentage. In the US, it's a lot more complicated than that. They have this thing called demonstrated need, which they calculate using some forms that they ask you to fill out. And so you may think you qualify for $50,000 of aid per year, and they may say, no, your demonstrated need according to our calculations is only $25,000. So there are things called net price calculators. For those of you who are in 10th grade, 11th grade, please do. I mean, it is mandated by the National Association of College Counseling that every university should have a net price calculator. Please go and put in, it'll ask you for a few basic things, put in the information, and they do try to give you a reasonably, I won't say accurate, but a ballpark, picture that's not that far from what you end up getting. There is federal versus institutional funds. So this is basically along with the next point, which is private versus public universities. So public universities are government funded. And so, they reserve, and their mandate is to serve the students of their own states. So they are not very generous with aid for students outside of the US. Even if you're a US citizen studying in India, or even if you're a US citizen studying in a different state, you're not going to qualify for much aid from that state. I mean, from the other state, from the state that you're not in. Private universities, because they don't have such constraints, especially the selective and the really good private universities, and by good, I'm just going by rankings, those, they do have deep pockets, so they are typically pretty generous with aid. But again, there, you have to get in first, right? That becomes the challenge. And then lastly, citizenship. If you are a US citizen, definitely your chances are better, because there's something called need blind. What they're saying is how much financial aid you need will not be a determining factor in us giving you admission. So first, they will just evaluate your application on the basis of merit, and then they will figure out how much aid to give you. If you're an international applicant, that need factor comes into play in evaluating your application itself. So if you're a need student, and if you're an international student with a need of $50,000, even if you're otherwise a student who may have gotten, that amount is huge. So they may still deny you admission because they have a limited amount of funds reserved for international students. By international for US, I mean non-US passport holders. If you're a US passport holder, for most of the universities, you're still considered a domestic student. Okay, any guess, since we're talking about money here, what is the US student loan debt in the US? A, B, C, or D? I think we must have some finance. Oh, look at that. Everybody is like, I think you guys are like really well read. And for comparison, for the kids, I think this is a number that you like, Canada's GDP is like pretty much the same as US student debt, which is kind of funny. Okay, please take a screenshot of this. For every region, except for India, every region, I have something called how to defray costs. We don't have time to go through the whole thing, but the one thing I would urge you to do is look at this first link. It'll give you historic data on, financial aid given out by about 400 or 500 odd universities. Figure out, okay, if I apply to XYZ university, what really are my chances of getting aid from there? So between this and the net price calculator, you should get a decent sense of whether a university gives out good scholarships or not. Okay. And then there are these full ride scholarships. 9th graders, 8th graders, if you are at all thinking US, take a look at these full ride scholarships and go through what it is that they are asking for, right? Many of them focus on leadership and service, right? And so you can't wake up in 10th grade or 11th grade and say, now I'm going to go off and do that 1 week or one, summer of like voluntary activity. And it doesn't work that way. And I'm also not saying, do it just for the sake of applications, but really that should, keep that at the back of your mind, right? And that's something that planning, how you will spend your time outside of the classroom, it should be much more thought out and well considered if you're applying to the US. And that process can start as early as 8th grade, but 9th grade, I mean, definitely. Even 10th is okay, but really you're giving yourself the best chance if you're in 9th grade and you start that stuff. So take a look at these scholarships. I will give you a little bit of historic. So our students have done pretty well. So we have 5 students, in the last 2 years who have enrolled in US universities, and almost half the class this year is applying to US universities. And in our first year, one student, out of a tuition of $55,000, they got a package of $40,000, which was almost the exact same amount another student from last year received as well. There was a student who basically went to a good public university where the tuition itself was, $35,000, and the student got an $18,000 merit scholarship. And this year we have a student who's getting a full ride scholarship. The person's not going to be paying anything actually. The university is paying for them to both study and live and work. But this is a student who really had fantastic academics. I mean, solid, no B's at all, all A stars, and had done a lot of stuff in school in terms of leadership and things like that. So, and ultimately it was a good fit. So that matters too. So any questions? We'll break for about 4 minutes for questions here. Okay, does a foreign passport holder only need to give SAT to enter? No, so it's not. So for private universities, yes, the SAT is accepted by many private Indian universities, but If you're looking, for example, at IIT, even if you're a foreign passport holder, you still have to take the JEE mains and the JEE advanced for IIT, right? And for NIT as well. Now they used to have this thing where they took the SATs, but that has been scrapped. So now it's all their own, the JEE mains. Are there any commonalities in terms of preparation for US and India? Yes, so see, ultimately, if you're in 8th, 9th, or 10th grade, right, and you're still trying to figure out where to apply, the biggest thing that kids do, which is really frustrating, is that at somewhere around, let's say you're studying for JEE mains, fine, you start that process in 9th grade, maybe you take extra coaching and all, but don't just give up your extracurriculars or leadership saying that that's it, I'm just going to be a muggo for the next 4 years, right? This is the biggest mistake people make. And then when they realize, oh, I may want to apply to the US as well, then it's like, okay, what have you done outside of classroom? Nothing. I've just been taking tuitions for the last 4 years. Obviously that's not the kind of student anybody wants, right? Maybe Indian technical universities, IITs, but really, like, I think that should, especially US universities, the idea is to have a student, yes, who's academically good, but also who'll contribute to making their community better, who'll be, because US universities are all residential campuses. And so at least the ones that you'll all be applying to. And one of the reasons, one of the things you get out of a college education is not just the academics, which you can, I mean, honestly, a lot of times these days you can go to Coursera and get the same course, right? But you're getting that peer group, you are getting those experiences, that global exposure. And so they want people who will be a vibrant member, an active member of that community. And if you're a kind of person who's not even bothered to, participate in school activities or show any initiative, why would somebody accept you compared to somebody who actually has done all that? So the commonality is, don't give up your extracurricular activities. And I'm not saying go do, check mark. Students think US applications is okay. I need an extracurricular check. I need community service check. It's not like that. It's really about finding one or two things that you're genuinely interested in and keep up with that. That's all it is. Our kids in the last couple of years who've also done exceptionally well with all these fantastic universities is not that they went out and cured cancer or founded an NGO and stuff like that, but and maybe that's what's needed for Harvard, but you can get into fantastic universities even if you don't kill yourself doing all that stuff, right? You just do things you're interested in, right? So if you've seen all your seniors, right, I mean, that's all they did. Like, last year, I mean, Purvi loves debate and she basically ran with it. And she did such a fantastic job because that truly was something she felt passionate about. Shreya loved, writing, and she generally was a good overall leader. So she's done a lot of leadership activities. Suhas loved science, loved research. So he just went and did a lot of that because that truly genuinely excited him, right? Prasad loved economics. He did a lot around that. So, it's just about finding those one or two things that really interest you and seeing how you can show more initiative and take that to the next level. Okay, sorry, that was like my little rant here. Okay, I think I just spoke for like 3 minutes. Indian student wishing for medicine, US is not a good option. If you are not a US citizen, definitely not a good option. If you're a US citizen, at some point, come talk to me, we'll talk, because it depends on your finances. The biggest difference is in India, you'll do 5 years of MBBS and you can right away start working or 5.5 years, right? In the US, you have to do your 4 years of undergrad and then you apply to medical school, which is another, 3 or 4 years. So it's a much longer process. And obviously it's more expensive as well. And medical schools in the US are very expensive too. It's like $40,000, $50,000 a year. And then there are these pathways, right? You can do an MBBS in India and then, do residency in the US. And there are places, consultants who will basically help you through that process. You have to take the US MLE after you do your MBBS, and then you can, do your residency in the US and you can work there. And then there are newer options, like I would urge you to check out like Grenada, which is this university called St. George's, where you do an MBBS and then they automatically place you in the US for residency. Okay. Let's see, quickly going through this. Community colleges in the US, I mean, there are some very good ones, but the issue with community colleges, one is the perception, right? Students and parents, even there, have this thing, that perception that, oh, community college is like, kind of like not so great. And the second is in terms of institutional support for international students, because just remember, community colleges are meant for the local population. So most of them will be commuting students. There won't be residence halls, it'll be very hard. So if you have family there, sure, the student can explore it. But otherwise, you have to be a very self-motivated student and a very independent student to really go down that community college route. Because most people don't look at it, please feel free to email me if that is something that you are seriously looking at. But the nice thing is, if you take a place like California, if you do 2 years in community college, and then you can transfer to any of the UCs, which are really competitive to get into, and you graduate with, nobody's going to even know you went to community college. You're going to graduate with the University of California degree. And you've saved for those 2 years, you've only spent some $18,000 a year or $15,000 rather than, $50,000, $45,000 in tuition. Activities when they're doing online classes, we have shared, maybe not with 8th graders. I'll see if Selja ma'am wants to share it, but we have shared a lot of opportunities with students in 9th through 12th. There are a lot of online internships, a lot of online programs that are happening. So students can continue to do all those things as well, right? We still are running clubs in school, so, you can still get involved. Okay. No, so Manthan school students haven't entered IIT in India just because this is the first year we have CBSE. It is very difficult to do a Cambridge curriculum and prepare for entrance exams, honestly, because the curriculum, there is enough of a gap, and the Cambridge curriculum is very, very rigorous in itself. To do that and then to apply for JEE mains is very difficult. So there is a self-selection thing there. It's not that, obviously a kid who can get into UC Berkeley can get into IIT. It's just we haven't had students go down that route. But now that we've started CBSE, in the next few years, we think, there will be enough kids attempting JEE mains and so on. And just remember, we've only had like 3 batches. So, so I think the attractiveness of the US university is mainly just about, like I said, I mean, the primary reason why people go is one is the course offerings, and this whole ability to do majors, minors, the flexibility. But I think the biggest thing is also if you can afford it, right? Or if your child is good and you think they can qualify. If you look at actually just looking at the sheer acceptance rates, right? The IITs, the acceptance rate is under 1%, right? And even a place like Harvard, the acceptance rate is around 4 to 5%. So that itself is, if you look at the top tier US universities versus the like really creme de la creme Indian universities, like it's actually, just numbers wise, and I'm not saying that's the only factor, but it's actually a bit easier to get into those than to get into IIT. But the second bigger thing in my mind is that if you take any of the top 100 universities in the US by ranking, they will still offer you a much better environment and a much better way of learning than the second tier Indian universities, right? And I'm talking beyond the top universities for engineering and for medicine and for humanities in India. But even if you take a place like DU, right? I mean, I think beyond the few seats in LSR, Miranda House, like whatever, like 4 or 5 colleges, I mean, really, what is the and I would also urge you to read, like there was this interview with the dean of like LSR, and a couple of other like these top in Indian universities, and they were talking about how much even these private Indian universities are able to do in terms of bringing excellent faculty and all, which they're not able to do because they're just so constrained, right? So I think for most students, I think it becomes that, like, if you can get into like a Texas A&M, right, which is ranked somewhere in like the 70s, but it's still a fantastic institute, right? Whereas you take a 70th ranked institution in India, I don't know. I mean, you can do your research, but I would doubt it would offer the same kind of, facilities, infrastructure, the same kind of pedagogy and stuff. So that's really, I think, the attraction of US universities. It's really expensive. That's the only downside, really. And yes, there are a lot of other factors that have happened in the last couple of years in terms of anti-immigration and racism that's concerning as well. No, so we are not trying to, okay. So one thing I have to say is we are not trying to say that our kids are only applying abroad. That's why I started with India. We have had all of 23 kids in the last 3 batches. And like I said, one of the things is that, yes, and out of those, by the way, in every year, only about half the students do apply to India and they're studying in India. It's just they're not going the NEET or the JEE route because they studied in the Cambridge curriculum. You can't do Cambridge curriculum and try to clear NEET. Yes, you can do CBSE and try to clear NEET, and you can do JEE mains and CBSE, because those are well aligned, right? Because those are all Indian boards and the syllabus is very, very well aligned. Now that we have CBSE, we'll have more students. It just so happened that the Cambridge curriculum is more amenable to either studying liberal arts or in private universities in India or for going abroad. So that's why we have these stories of foreign universities. And by the way, I did start that first slide with students studying in Indian universities from Manthan. So I wouldn't, I don't agree with that statement. No, yes, you can write PSAT. Kabir, that's something that, we can talk about, but write it in 9th grade, don't write it in 8th grade. Okay, it is way above time, so I'm going to skip to the next. Okay, Canada. So which of these is Canada's national animal? My students, geography, any idea? GK? Polar bear, you would think so. It's actually the beaver. Isn't that cute? Okay. All right, any guesses here? These are all some good some of them are well-known Canadian universities. Any idea which is the oldest one in Canada? Yeah, you would think no, University of Toronto or McGill, because these are names that we've heard. It's actually the University of New Brunswick. And don't even ask me how to pronounce Saskatchewan. I think that's how they say it. Saskatchewan, yes, thank you. My son is sitting and telling me. Okay, so Canada, we will just quickly, we won't go through overviews and all. There are about 97 universities in Canada, pretty small for a country that's geographically that big. And about 80 of those are public universities, and they're very well regulated. So the quality of education is very good. Unlike the US, most Canadian universities actually, don't put these like super serious caps on their numbers. So, they're able to educate a lot of students. So, I think in terms of just the ability to get in, if you're a good student, is much higher with Canadian universities than it is with US universities, at least the top-notch ones, right? So it's easier to get into a U of T or a UBC or Waterloo, which are like the top 3 universities in Canada, or McGill, than it is to get into, comparable like top 20 university in the US. Okay, so in terms of the costs, so Canada, it's most are pretty reasonable, but University of Toronto is 57,000 Canadian dollars, which is that upper end here of 33 lakhs. And like UBC will be maybe 45,000. So the top ones are, but at the same time, McGill is half of that. It's 27 or 28,000 Canadian dollars. So there is a range. If you're a Canadian citizen, you have hit the jackpot, because regardless of where you've grown up, if you hold a Canadian passport, you will qualify for this 3 lakh, which is 6,000 or 7,000 Canadian dollars tuition fee. The living costs are also, it's not that exorbitant. Of course, if you're staying in a place like Toronto, that's going to be much more expensive than if you are in a smaller city, right? One nice thing about Canadian universities, I'm so sorry, my son thinks if he runs really fast like that, he won't be able to see. So the co-op programs are worth noting, because most Canadian universities offer really good co-op programs. What that means is you spend 1 semester actually working and earning, and you get credits, academic credits for that 1 semester. Co-op programs are typically most common for business and engineering degrees, but also there are math programs with a co-op, option built in and things like that. So, and you can actually earn, you can defray the cost of 1 whole year of studying through these co-op programs. So it's really nice. Of course, the co-op programs are more competitive than the non-co-op programs, but it's a really good option to look at. The only thing with that is you don't know ahead of time how much you'll earn with the co-op, right? So you have to trust the numbers that they give you. And because it's well regulated and these are all public universities, you can go in with that assurance. But you won't know upfront. Like, it's not like a scholarship where you know that your net cost is going to be so much for that year. Like, you may earn 30,000 Canadian dollars in the co-op, you may earn 60. There's a degree of uncertainty there. It's usually a 4-year degree. Again, there is flexibility. You can do transfers. The nice thing is here, admissions are based mostly on academics. Of course, for the scholarships, again, because there are a few, I'll show you in the next slide. But for those, you do have to be, not even well-rounded, but you have to be exceptional, right? You have to have shown significant leadership or service or in addition to your academics. The post-study is one of the wonderful things about Canada. They offer a 3-year post-study visa, during which time you can stay in Canada, look for a job. And the pathway to permanent residence is also, you can get started during that period itself, to apply once you get a job, to apply for your permanent residence. And I'm sure, there must be at least some of you who probably lived in Canada and stuff. So, okay. And this is, you can again take a screenshot. These are some of the more generous scholarships. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. None of these are in any of my slides because yes, 97 universities, I haven't looked into all of them. But these are some of the common ones and some of the very generous ones. And even apart from this, many universities will offer automatic merit scholarships. So based on your grades, you may qualify for, and those will be smaller amounts like $5,000, $10,000, that kind of thing. These are more like, 40,000, 100,000, like really generous ones. Okay, if you guys have taken a screenshot, this break will be very quick. I'm just going to give a couple of minutes if anybody has a couple of questions. What kind of work options are we talking about? I don't know, it's a whole country. I mean, you can work in anything you want, right? You can be an engineer, you can be in finance. I think that's a very broad question. Maybe I don't understand the question, but I'm not sure. So unless there's some clarification on the question, I'm just going to wait and see. Any other questions about Canada? Okay, then. So PG abroad versus UG abroad, I mean, I think it's something of a, okay, one thing is the cost, right? Since we are talking about cost today, at a PG level, you will definitely be eligible and you will have access to a lot more financial aid and funding, especially in places like Europe. If you look at scholarships, if you Google scholarships in anywhere, right, Germany or Netherlands or anywhere, you will see that for PG, there's a lot more scholarships available than at the UG level. So from that standpoint, if cost is a concern, you're definitely better off waiting and applying for PG. The second is, in some cases, it's a personal decision because maybe at a UG level, you're not ready, right? Like back in the day, my own family was like, I mean, of course, they couldn't afford it either, but they were like, no, we won't send you because we don't know anyone abroad. But, but by PG, it's like, okay, you're working, you kind of are on your own, so go figure it out kind of thing. So there's that comfort, right, and maturity that your child will, they're an adult by then, right? By the time, I mean, they're technically an adult in undergrad, but they're a lot more sheltered. So, in that sense, PG might be better, right? Any exceptions for US citizens in Canada? I don't think so. I'm 99% sure, unless they're a dual citizen, in which case they'll qualify for the in-state residence. But otherwise, I don't think there's any preference for, and maybe I can check that for you, but I'm pretty sure it's not the case. Oh, I see. You're talking about the restrictions on the nature of work. I don't know. I think for most white collar jobs, it shouldn't be an issue. Oh, okay. So this is actually a good question for whoever asked that BBED 0 SEC. So I understood your question now. So yes, there is some restriction in the sense that Canada has provinces, right? So for example, the professional degrees, for example, if you do architecture in one province, you actually have to then take a separate licensing exam in the other province if you want to work in the other province. So if you study in Ontario province and then you want to go to Quebec, you have to take another licensing exam. So for medicine and for architecture and law, I guess, these would be some concerns. And by the way, Canada also, one thing for kids who are studying medicine, I always, I mean, India is really the best option. You can look at UK, you can look at Australia. But other than these two, it's really very hard. Like places like Canada also, there's such few seats for international students in medicine that it's really not worth, considering it at all. So that's just a note on medicine. Australian citizens in the US, no, they will be treated as international students, the same as Indian citizens. In the US, unless you're a US citizen, it really doesn't make any difference. Are there any specific competitive exams that are needed to apply to Canada? No, just your grades. But I'll tell you one thing, in a normal year, so there are like the University of Waterloo conducts these math exams there are different levels. So at the high school level, it's Euclid. It's all named after these mathematicians. And, some of the universities will take that into account. So it's not a competitive exam, but it's something that looks nice in your profile. And if you do well in it, they'll take that into account when they're evaluating your application. Difference and advantages of studying undergraduate degree in US and then going for an MS. So I think somewhere I touched upon this a little bit. I think it is, it's really a cost factor. You will be eligible for more financial aid at the PG level. But otherwise, I think it's really a cost thing. Okay, moving on. Okay, first, any guesses what this wonderful building in the background is? We're moving to the UK now. One of our students is studying here, and yes, I'm sorry if the parents feel like I'm just talking about international, but LSE, excellent, Shreya. Yes, it is London School of Economics. It's really a gorgeous building. One of our students is studying there. Okay, what is the group of top research universities in the UK called? I think this might be an easy one. I think our parents are very well knowledgeable. Anybody? Have I lost everyone? Oh, starting with the D, Ivy League. A, B. Okay. So bit split. Okay, so this is actually called the Russell Group. The group of 8 is for Australia. I haven't put it anywhere in my Australia slide, but that's what the group of 8. And so Ivy League is a US thing, and Humphrey Group is something I just made up. Okay, UK, typically the tuition is 10 to, so it's comparable to Canada really here, right at the top end of the range. That was 33 lakhs, this is about 36. The cost of living is a bit more expensive in the UK. The downside really is, like, unlike Canada where you still have scholarships, like there are very few scholarships for the UK. But for especially engineering and management courses, many programs have a sandwich year option where basically between your second and your third year, you spend a whole year working in the industry. And the university will give you, they will give you support to find those placements. So this year, one of our students who's a UK citizen has applied only for programs that have a sandwich year because she wants to know if the course she's studying, if that's what she really wants to do, or if she wants to do an MBA after or whatever it is. So it's a good option. UK has 3-year degrees, but engineering, it's more of an Indian model. Engineering is a 4-year degree. Scotland, which comes under, UK, has only 4-year degrees, like all degrees are 4-year degrees. And UK, the other thing is, there's no flexibility. So in most of the cases, 99%, the course that you apply for is what you'll be studying for those 3 years. Transfers may be possible, but it's not a very normal thing. So, if you've applied for economics, that's what you will be studying for the next 3 years. It's not like, and there's very little flexibility to do majors, minors, and things like that. The application is reasonably straightforward. It's academics based, but they look at something called supercurriculars, not so much the extracurriculars. So it's a subject related extracurricular. So they look at things that you've done to show them interest in that subject. So have you read enough about that subject outside of the classroom? If you're looking for medicine in the UK, they like to see that you've shadowed a doctor or that you've done some sort of caregiving, because that for them is really important, that, that human element is there when you're applying for medicine. And then there are personal statement and recommendations. UK, thankfully, starting last year, they used to have a 4-month post-study visa, which was ridiculous. So now they've made it a 2-year post-study visa. So you get to stay in the country for 2 years while you look for a job. And then there's a decent path to permanent residency as well. This you can take a screenshot of. It's basically some of the notable scholarships. And some of these, the way it works, like the Oxford one, for example, you have to get admission into the university first and then apply. I guess actually for most of them, it's like that. So, okay. And with that, I will move to Europe. Okay. Name that country. Little quiz. Kids, anybody want to name that flag? Oh, good job. Look at that. Oh, wait. Yes. Okay, great. The kids are all GK masters, or maybe it's the parents. Okay, Sweden. And the reason I put that also, we're not going to cover those countries in great detail, but like incidentally, outside of the UK, Sweden has one of the highest ranked, top ranked medical universities, the Karolinska Institute. I don't know much about it, I'll say, because, it's, like I said, medicine outside of India is a tricky thing to apply for. Okay. Europe. So we're going to be covering just a few regions, but typically, and this is, I'm really clubbing Ireland, Netherlands, Germany, Spain, France, Italy, and Switzerland into this bucket, okay? So there are 3-year programs, there are 4-year programs. Germany in particular, because many kids come and ask me, ma'am, Germany, because it has wonderful technical institutes and the public education is free. If you're studying in an Indian board, there's something called a student collect that you have to do, which is like a 13th year. So you don't apply directly to university, but you apply for that student collect. And then once you finish that year, then you again have to apply to the university. And so it's kind of to show equivalence, because their education system is, the Abitur, it's a 13-year thing. Kids studying IB or A levels, Cambridge curriculum don't need to do that extra year. Now in Europe in general, also there are public and private universities. Public universities are obviously heavily subsidized to the extent where you'll pay very little or no money at all in fees. The private universities, you will be paying fees, and a significant amount in some cases. The public universities really in places like Germany and Spain and Italy, the problem is that, yes, it's excellent quality education and it's very cheap, but language proficiency has to be demonstrated, because you won't find that many English language courses in those universities, right? And then there's this little nitty-gritty thing called university versus University of Applied Sciences. So in some places like Germany and the Netherlands, there are universities which are more for, the curriculum is a lot more theoretical. And then there are University of Applied Sciences where the curriculum is a lot more practical focused. It's not a vocational training or anything. It's just, more practical focused education. But in some cases, there are issues around applying for a master's, I believe it's like Germany too. Like if you study in a University of Applied Sciences, then it's going to be difficult to, I think those degrees are not recognized for a master's. So this is something that you may want to do research into if you're applying to these countries. The admissions are straightforward, academics-based admissions. You may have to write a personal statement or an essay or appear for an interview, but and language proficiency, like I said, if you're looking at Germany, you have to have a B2 level, German language proficiency. And the post-study visa ranges anywhere from 1 to 1.5 years, depending on the country. So as you can see, in the higher end of these, by the way, tend to be private universities, like especially in France, Italy, Germany, and Spain. That 17 lakh figure or 11 lakh, those are the private universities, and the 0.8 lakhs, which is practically, nothing. And that's really the semester fee that you're paying, which is some, I don't know, per year, some 1250 euros or something like that. It's really cheap. So and so where the cost comes in, and this is what I was talking about in my first slide, is actually, if you look at these places, if you see the living cost is really the big cost, right? And look at Switzerland here. That's in our upper end. And by the way, I think Switzerland, I'm sorry, I may have made a bit of a mistake there, because I think the private universities in Switzerland are not that cheap. So this might only be the public. I apologize. But the living cost is 16 lakhs, because Switzerland, the real estate is really expensive. I think healthcare is really expensive. Everything is like really expensive there. But Switzerland mostly has, institutes that are very good for things like, hotel management, for hospitality, and even the business courses that they offer, many of them are focused on that hospitality and tourism industry. And so, we find, at least maybe as our numbers grow, we'll have more kids looking into those, but, mostly kids. The reason I put a star around Ireland and Netherlands is excellent quality, all English language taught courses. So if you are looking at Europe, please do look at those two. Fantastic universities. And Ireland also, Dublin is a hub for financial services, for technology, for tech companies in that region. So there's a lot of opportunity and scope for jobs and, internships and stuff. And, unlike maybe some of these other places, like in Ireland, especially, I think almost all the Indians who are there are in white collar jobs, unlike a place like in the UK or even in like parts of the US, where you will find a lot of like, I mean, yes, there are a lot of white collar jobs, Indians in white collar jobs, but there's a heavy amount of Indian truck drivers and taxi drivers and things like that, right? So that's something interesting about Ireland, I'll say. How to defray costs. Okay, I'm going to stop for 10 seconds on each slide. Please take a photo if you want, a screenshot, because we really can't go through all of these. Okay, so this is Ireland. Moving on, this is Netherlands. That is Germany. The DAAD is really a wonderful website for all things German. France. Italy. Spain. And with that, we will break a little bit for questions for a couple of minutes. Yes, so Amog, that star just meant English language courses and my recommendation for if you have to look at countries there. Yes, Chinmay's guess was correct. How the performance graph should be from 9th to 12th. Upwards, trending upwards, I guess. I mean, I think, just do the best you can, right? I feel like for the kids, I mean, don't also make it, I know kids, and especially I know, my nieces and nephews were studying in the US. I mean, it becomes such a like constant, oh, I need to like, and it's more of like an Indian Asian thing, but they put themselves under so much pressure. But I feel like if you're genuine to yourself and you do your best, right? I think that's what it is, because many times, especially ninth graders, you're still in that, you're still children, but there's that seriousness is not there. And so for parents of ninth graders who are here, I think just start to get serious about your academics. That's all. You don't have to like kill yourself trying to always get A stars, but do your best, right? So if you're inherently a C or B level child, it's not fair to also expect that not all of us are good at all subjects, right? I mean, most of us adults in this room, we had subjects which we did well in and subjects which we really did awful in. And for those subjects where we weren't good, expecting us to suddenly get 95 plus, it's pointless. So so you can just do your best. That's all it is, right? And be serious about it. When we do offer some of these PSAT and exams like that, take them. Just basically try to do your best, right? I know it sounds kind of very simple, but really that's all there is. English is commonly used in Sweden. I really don't. Oh, so Sweden, we had a student last year successfully apply to Stockholm School of Economics, which is a very top ranked university in Sweden for economics. And that was an English medium course. They had just started an English medium program actually 2 years ago, BSc in economics. Till then, it was all taught in Swedish, but she had applied there and she got in. Acceptance rate in Germany compared to India. Will you excuse me for a second? I'm sorry. Acceptance rates, I really don't know for Germany. I have to see. Netherlands slide, somebody wanted. 1 second. Let me see if I can go back. There it is. Oh, factors that help in getting better aid for UG in the US. I think what we have found is, see, because it's need based, some of it depends on your income. So no matter how amazing your child is, right? If you're well placed and if you're in that enviable position where you can afford, out of the 2 crores, let's say you can actually afford like 1.75 crores of that, then you're not going to get that much aid, because the aid is really, much of the US has need based aid. Merit-based aid, yes, it really depends on the student's academics mostly. That's what it is. And the other stuff, in terms of need-based aid, the other factor is also, if you look at that first link that I shared for the US, please go through that. What you'll see is that the universities that are most generous with aid are in the extremes. There'll be the super selective universities, which are very generous with aid. So, your Harvard, Yale, Stanford, MIT, these are all very generous with aid, but crazy to get into, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you'll have universities that are very generous with aid, which are more regional universities, smaller private universities, who are really kind of looking to increase their international student population, or trying to get kids above their profile, right? So these may be universities where the typical, let's say, student is at a 3.2 GPA and like a 1300 SAT score. And if your child shows up with a 1400, 1450 score, then yeah, they're going to try and entice them with a scholarship or a discount. Sometimes, a lot of times when they say merit-based scholarship, it actually is a tuition discount. So I hope that helps. Knowing other languages, I mean, I think, yeah, if you know German, that'll help when you're applying to Germany. So in that sense, yes. But if from if you're looking at the US or anything, or India, not really. I think they want some second language. That's all. They want at least 2 to 4 years of second language study, 2 years at least in high school and 9th through 12th. But otherwise, there's no. See, it's one of those things, right? I feel like with the US, the kids who do really well, let's say if you were really passionate about French or like Spanish, right? And yes, if you self learn it, and then you're also able to do stuff around that, with in terms of your extracurriculars, and not because you have to, but because you're truly genuinely interested, then yeah, that may help, a little bit. But you can do that with French, you can do that with Hindi, you can do that with English too. I mean, so many kids, you would be amazed. They say extracurriculars. Last year, the admissions officer from Brown University, which is one of the Ivy Leagues, she said it so well. She said, it's amazing how many kids discount reading as a serious extracurricular activity. And by reading, I don't mean the same old, like the young adult fiction that's floating out there, and which is good, as a starter thing. But getting more into serious, literature, or exploring your own culture through literary texts, right? I think so many kids don't. There are some interesting ways you can stand out among the thousands and thousands of Indian students who apply with fantastic grades, who all have kind of similar extracurriculars, MUNs, and student council. So beyond a point, I think it's also looking for that uniqueness, right? Of course, none of that will help if your grades are bad, but I'm saying this is for students who already are, performing pretty well. And by the way, all that I'm saying is mainly for like the top 20, 30 universities in the US also. It doesn't so much, like I said, I mean, it's when you go into even like the 40th, 50th, 70th ranked universities, as long as you have solid academics and some form of involvement in your school community, you stand a good chance. You don't have to kill yourself. This is what I'm saying is for universities in the top 20, 25, right? Which are definitely more selective, and the need to stand out becomes more stronger over there. Okay, sorry. I will quickly continue. It's 4:20. Okay, quiz again. Don't you love this? Okay. What percentage of international branch campuses are found in the Middle East? By international branch campuses, I mean universities, either like US, European universities, Indian universities that have a campus outside of their home country. 25%, okay, seems to be like a B, 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 C, 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 C. Okay, so somewhere between 33 and 50%, and it's actually 33. Any guesses what's the second biggest region for that? One is the Middle East. I think this should be an easy one because of, it's no, it's actually not India, but it's yes, it's Singapore, Hong Kong, China. It's basically Asia, like Southeast Asia, East Asia, right? Okay, just a quick GK thing. So here, bottom right, you can already see it's BITS Pilani, Dubai. The top right is Manipal, Dubai. The top left is Northwestern University in Qatar. And the bottom left is NYU Abu Dhabi. So these are the, and so this is just to give you guys this just a little GK, it doesn't matter. So just because we were talking about 1/3 being in the Middle East, you can see that China is, and this is a little dated, I don't know what the numbers are for the recent one, but if you look at Asia, it's like China, Singapore, Malaysia is a big one. So there's that. Okay. So if you look at the Middle East, and by the way, I've really focused primarily on the UAE because that has, I think UAE and some of these places like Qatar and stuff, because that's really where a lot of, the interest is, because I don't see anyone wanting to go and study in Saudi Arabia or like Iran. So, so 8 to 10 lakhs for Indian universities, which is still very reasonable. And obviously American universities, it is at the American university fee level. Israel is an interesting place because they have very, very highly ranked technical universities. So there's Technion, Tel Aviv University, and a couple of others. But the only thing is there's no stay back option. They don't want any, settlers really. So you study there and you kind of have to come back, or you have to go somewhere else for your master's. It's just an interesting thing that I thought I'd put out there. UAE living costs, obviously it depends on the place too, and depends on how you live. I feel like that 2 lakhs is a little understated. That's what I found, in most of the recommendations online, but from the universities also themselves. But I feel like it could creep up more in places like Dubai, because it's, but even in Dubai, you could live in Sharjah or like Fujairah and one of the other Emirates, and then you could commute into your college. Admissions and academics, I think again, for Indian universities, it's the Indian admissions mode. For American universities, it's the holistic admissions. Some interesting things, right, which people may not know. For example, BITS Dubai, they don't even need you to write BITSAT, which is what's required in India for BITS, right? BITS Pilani Dubai, you just need your grades. You just apply with your grades, and if you have a 90% plus, you actually have a decent shot of getting in. So, if you, and actually they, even their placements and all in BITS Dubai, you can sit for placements, in the Indian campus as well. There may be some constraints, but that's what the outreach person had mentioned. And they'd actually come as part of that Indian Universities Fair we're done. We did have BITS Pilani Dubai also as one of the people who came and talked about it. So I don't know how many of you attended, but when we do have fairs like that, please do attend. You've learned some very interesting things, right? Okay, and then post-study, it is actually very limited. But what you can do is you can just apply for essentially you can apply for a tourist visa and stay there and, look for a job. So there is no automatic transfer of your student visa into a working visa. So you have to kind of get into a residence visa and then look for a job. But if you're in a place like BITS or Manipal, then your placements are actually decent. So you won't have to worry too much about that. And then there are free trade zones as well, like the Jebel Ali free trade zone. And there are, I think, like 50 free trade zones in Dubai right now. So over there, you can get you can apply for a freelance visa and things like that if you are not able to find a job. So there are ways to work around that visa constraint. There's not, American universities in the Middle East actually offer generous financial aid, but the programs are limited. For example, Northwestern Qatar, the first time I saw it, I got so excited. I said, wow. But then they only offer media and communication studies. That's the only thing that's offered. NYU Abu Dhabi, fantastic aid packages, but this acceptance rate is 3%. And also the courses are also limited there. And so it's highly, highly competitive, right? Actually, it's easier to get into NYU New York than it is to get into NYU Abu Dhabi. Indian universities are really worth looking at in the Middle East. So, I would urge you guys to keep an eye on that, if you were inclined towards that. Okay, going into Singapore, Hong Kong. So like I said, the international branch campuses are there in places like Malaysia, but I haven't really covered those because really a lot of people, mainly look at Singapore and Hong Kong in this part of Asia. So Singapore has, five government public universities, right? Which many of you have heard of, NUS and NTU, but there's also SMU, Singapore Management University, SUTD, and SUSS. And all of these are, fantastic options for those particular disciplines. This amount, what I'm showing, is without any grants, right? So at the upper end, it's 25 lakhs for international students, and the living cost is pretty high over there. But the MOE is Ministry of Education. So Singapore has this thing where you can sign a Ministry of Education grant, a contract. So all you're saying is, when I graduate from university, I will spend 3 years working at a Singapore registered company. That may or may not be in Singapore, but it has to be a Singapore registered company. And if you sign that contract, then basically you can get a 50% waiver on your tuition. So we have a student currently studying at NUS doing computer science. So, she has signed that contract, and, you can get out of the contract. You just have to prorate it and you have to pay them some amount. I think probably like whatever that tuition difference is, or I don't know what that fine is, but after 1 year of working, if you say, I can't do this anymore, I want to do something else or go out of the country or work somewhere else, then you can get out of it. It's not like they're not going to throw you in jail for that, but you have to pay a fine. You do get a 1-year post-study visa. Hong Kong, again, it's a similar range as Singapore. And Hong Kong universities actually offer a lot of, Hong Kong has a lot more universities. Singapore also, by the way, those are the 5 public ones. There are, like Yale NUS, which is fantastic, and of course, very highly competitive. So there are these IBCs, international branch campuses in Singapore as well. So Yale is one of them. ESSEC Business School has one. I think there are a few Australian universities, Deakin, I want to say, but you can look these up. I have actually a document here listing it, which I can maybe show at the end or something. So yeah, Hong Kong, a lot of universities have pretty generous aid. So even Hong Kong University, which is ranked after NUS, I think it's ranked 2nd or 3rd in Asia, probably after NUS and NTU. And they offer like really generous, not aid, merit scholarships, right? So in this part of Asia, there is no need-based aid or anything. There's just purely merit scholarships. So, and that depends purely on your academics. So here under academics and admissions, I've said it's just how you fare in your academics. Plus, the only extracurriculars they really look at will be things that are academic in nature. So if you've won any national or international level competitions in academics, like Olympiads and things like that, they will take that into account. But otherwise, it's, they don't care that you've been head boy, head girl, that kind of thing. They do expect a personal statement. There are essays, there are some recommendation letters in some cases, right? Okay, differing costs, like I said, it's just scholarships from the universities and the Ministry of Education grants. There's really not a whole lot else. You may be asked to write an extra essay or so for some of the scholarships. Okay, our last region, Australia, New Zealand, Oceania. Any guesses here? Melbourne, ANU. Yeah, I think this is all over the place. Even I don't know. It's Sydney. And it's not as old as I thought. I mean, it was established in 1851, I guess. Okay, I also like Australia and New Zealand as a study destination. I think it's, same thing. There is, especially around the big cities, there is, the employment is good. The way they've handled the pandemic is good. They do offer, okay, the scholarships are not that much. So you'll rarely see like a full, 100% scholarship or anything like that. Many of them cap out at, maybe like 15, 20,000 Australian dollars when the fee is like around 40, 45. So here's the tuition breakdown for Australia. New Zealand is definitely, comparatively cheaper. And by the way, I mean, check out like University of Auckland, right? It has some great courses. It is ranked in the top, I don't know whether it's 50 or 100 in the QS global rankings. And it's really very, it's worth looking at. I think people don't realize that New Zealand's also, they're trying to do more in terms of outreach and building their international student population. So this year, like Study New Zealand, which is the government organization, is actually holding a lot of webinars and things like that. They still haven't opened their borders yet, neither has Australia, but you can still apply this year, and students who get in this year will, it seems it's a matter of time, I guess. Okay, and both of them, again, just like Canada, they have 3-year work visas, post-study visas. So it's a great stay back option. And the one quirky thing about the Australia, New Zealand is that they have multiple intakes. So there is a February intake, and then there is a July, August intake. Some of them have 4 intakes actually, like it'll be like every 3 months, they basically have an intake. It doesn't mean anything. It's just, what works for you. I think it's actually a nice thing because depending on which board you're studying and when your board exams are, you can choose to actually take a bit of a break and apply after your board exams instead of trying to worry about applying during your 12th grade. And then here are some scholarships on the right side. You can take a look at them. And this on the right, this building is Macquarie University, where one of our students is studying. Okay. Last thing, and then I'm surprisingly on time. I wanted to end at 4:30 and leave some time for questions. But okay, so we've had, like I said, and this is why we don't have also NEET and JEE and kids getting into IIT, because we've had 23 kids across 3 batches. This year we have 30. So cumulative of the last 3 years we have in this batch, and next batch is 50. The batch after that, like I said, we are pretty much doubling each year. And some of that is because of the kind of universities our students are getting into. So we've had across these 23 students, we've had 103 offers. And so QS is basically QS university rankings, and they have become, along with the Times Higher Education rankings, these have become like the go-to rankings that people look at. And they take into account different factors. And again, you can read the methodology on their website, but they look at reputation, they look at research output, they look at international population, they look at, many different things. So we have, out of these 103 offers, 20 of those offers are from, so about 5% of those offers are from QS. 20% of the offers are from QS top 50 universities. And that's not just spread, many schools will say, oh, we have like, this and that. And then it turns out like 2 kids are holding like 10 of those offers. But these 20 of those QS top 50 offers are spread across 9 students, right? Which I think for me, that's like more of a point of happiness and pride, that it's not all concentrated on those 1 or 2 kids, but every child is able to, do really well. And another 12 offers are from universities ranked between 51 and 100. And this is an additional 3 students which are not covered in that original 9, in the first bucket. And then 14 more which are in the QS 101 to 200 ranked universities. And there are 4 more students in that. So basically 70% of our students have at least 1 offer from a QS top 200 university. Top 200 may sound like not such a great accomplishment, but just to put it in context, okay, the QS World University Rankings, they consider 5,500 universities for inclusion in these rankings, and they only rank the top 1,000. There are about 25,000 universities in the world. And for comparison, the Indian Institute, the top IIT in India, which is IIT Bombay, appears at number 172 on this list, okay? So that's why we've decided to include all top 200. So when we look at it in that context, I think our students have performed incredibly well. And it is a testament to the way teachers, teach them and the way they have been nurtured academically from a very young age. Many of these students in the first 3 batches have been with us for, 5, 6, 7 years. So, there is that. So So this is only for the past 2 years. This year's updates are actually on Facebook. I urge you guys to please go and look at Facebook. This is for 13 students across 2 graduating classes. The stars there denote scholarships or financial aid, and the plus denotes that multiple students were enrolled in the university. So Ashoka has 3 students. So we have in the US, we have NYU and Berkeley and UW Seattle. We have London School of Economics. We have NUS. So, we are pretty proud of some of these, not some of these, we're proud of all of these offers. I think wherever the student ended up, I mean, these are all some excellent offers, right? So, yeah, I think that is my last slide. And thank you very much for coming and spending these 1.5 hours with me. How many of the 16 student? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, 1 second. I'd have to think through it in my head. The 16 students who got offers from QS 200, I would say, so for example, I'll tell you this, right? Our student studying at NUS is an Indian citizen. The 5 students studying in India are Indian citizens. The student who's studying in Australia is an Indian citizen. The student who went to LSE is a UK citizen. And of these students who are in the US, the one in Washington, Seattle, and the one at Fordham are Indian citizens. So I don't know the numbers, but I would say actually more than 50% are Indian students. So the students getting into international universities, are they from CBSE? So like I said earlier also, right? We haven't had CBSE in 12th grade till now. This is our first year where our students in 12th grade are taking CBSE. So all the last 3 years placements are Cambridge placements. But I will tell you one thing. I mean, I think CBSE students are really well positioned because, our school, we don't have any data, but other schools, all foreign universities accept CBSE. There is no disadvantage at all to doing CBSE. There is a slight advantage to doing Cambridge if you're applying abroad because, places like the US, you'll get credits and things like that, college credits if you do Cambridge, but there is really no disadvantage to doing CBSE. Right. Some of the top UK universities like Cambridge, UCL and all, you may have to take an additional exam if you're doing CBSE. And like Germany, I said, you have to do that extra 1 year. But really, it's accepted everywhere. If you go to, up north, there are these huge CBSE schools where so many kids go to top 20 universities in the world. There's really no issue. Educational loans for studying abroad, probably, I'm sorry, I don't know really. But yes, I think maybe, I mean, I don't know if Ram sir is there, if he knows anything about it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you do get Ramya educational loans. However, banks play very safe. They ask for a lot of collateral. So if you have properties which you can put, then they do give educational loans.
Okay. What is the worst college uni a student has got into? There is nothing like that, right? There's no best also. If you say best college, I don't know. It's what's best for the student, right? I'll show you next time we meet some statistics on Harvard, right? The number of suicide rates in that place or even in IITs and all, it is so high. Who is it good for? Clearly not the child who took their own life, right? So this question of good versus bad is, it's really at some level what is a good fit for you, right? It's if you're a more laid back student and you go to a university that's really cutthroat competitive, you're studying with 25 kids in your section at once, and it's a very warm atmosphere, all your friends. Suddenly when you go to a place where it's like you're studying 8 hours, 10 hours a day and everybody is competitive, you're not going to be happy there, right? That may be the top ranked university in the world, but is it good for you? No. So it's not, it's a really subjective thing, right? There was some questions further up for something else, I don't know. Anyway, please, if I missed any questions, please repost it here in case I missed. One of the indirect understanding I got from this session is that clearing JEE with IGCSE may be impossible. It is not impossible. And by the way, I will make a clarification here also. When you say IGCSE, that is the Cambridge qualification for 10th grade. In 11th and 12th grade, it's called A levels. But I understand your question is that Cambridge, taking Cambridge in 11th and 12th, can you clear JEE? So last year or last to last year in 2019, the student who came All India rank 10 and topper in the girls category was a student who did Cambridge from Ahmedabad International School. So there are cases, and there are some schools where, you know, even though they're Cambridge schools, every year, because they have huge numbers, every year a couple of kids will get very good JEE ranks. But those are really exceptional kids. In general, it is smarter to stick to CBSE if JEE is the route you want to go, because the syllabus is more aligned with JEE. Cambridge gives you a lot of lovely higher order thinking skills and things like that, but there are curriculum gaps. So I won't lie to you and say, you know, it's easy to do. If you're an exceptional child, you can, but it's a lot of hard work also, which is true anyway for JEE, but it's more so if you take Cambridge, because at that level, the Cambridge curriculum is really rigorous as well. And that's why, you know, in places like US, they recognize that and they give you college level credits for Cambridge curriculum courses. Probability of visa rejections for Indian students for undergraduation. It has happened. I mean, I've heard of, it's never happened to, I mean, anyone I know, but there are stories always floating around. It could happen, but I think the probability is very low. I don't know the exact numbers actually for things like visa rejections. But you know, the reason also sometimes, so for example, a couple of years ago, this happened to a fair, you know, like I heard a lot of stories coming out of places like Mumbai, where it happened for actually Canada. And the reason was apparently that the student, there was some, like, it's usually things like documents are missing, or the offer letter is not clear enough, or something like that, or something which is easily rectifiable. So, you know, I think it should be okay for the most part. Yes, BITS Dubai accepts both Cambridge and CBSE grades. Okay. For US citizen getting UG degree from countries like Germany, Ireland, or Israel, what would the work opportunities be like in the US? I think if it's from a good institute, right, from a well-known institute in Germany, Ireland, or Israel, then the work opportunities should be the same as, you know, anyone else. The issue is like the H-1Bs, right? I mean, getting an H-1B, I mean, now I think recently last week, there was news that the Biden administration may be removing some of those caps on H-1Bs. The trickier thing I think is for many people is that this long-term thing, right? So sure, you can go on an H-1B, maybe live there, work there for 3-6 years, but settling down is a real issue actually, and especially with the H-1B category, because the green card caps on India are so, you know, they're so oversubscribed, right? And there's a quota. So it's now taking like if you join the queue today, I've heard that you may not even get it, you know, you may die waiting for it. That's what it seems like. It's just progressively gotten worse and worse. So it's not so much, you know, even the opportunities or the H-1B sponsorship. It's beyond that, it becomes a problem. The path to permanent residence is not as easy as it was in our generation when many of us went there, right? Does Manthan do anything specific training for kids to improve their leadership skills? So we do a lot. I mean, I think even in the online format, you know, like I said, clubs have been running. We have student clubs which students can participate in. We have student clubs that students have created and are running it. So, you know, the debate club is one shining example, because it was started by Rishita, who's now at LSE. When she first went, you know, she got into the national level debating championships, and then she came back. She said, "My God, I've learned so much. I want to share it with my juniors." So she created the club. She came up with a wonderful plan, and she did a great job. Then Purvi took it over, and she took it. Purvi is one of our graduating seniors this year, and she took it to a next level. I mean, not only did she represent Team India in the international competitions, she trained and she got, I think, some I don't know, Ram sir will know. Like, I think she had 3 kids qualify for the nationals this year, of which two are on the international team this year, and one of them just won something also, and she's now in 9th grade. So, and we had this on our FB post. Kids in a regular year, we encourage kids to conduct events. So even things like your Rangmantan and forgetting the name of the other
Umang.
event. Umang, sorry, I kept thinking Utkarsh, which is the Hindi textbook. Rangmantan and Umang, the student council organizes those. Then this year, the 12th graders were so proactive, the outgoing 12th graders. They said, we want to form an election commission. And because we're a growing school, we want to revamp the whole way the student council is run. We want more accountability from them. We want them to have clearer responsibilities. So they created a whole charter, and they ran the elections. They created the website for the student elections, and so there's a lot of leadership opportunities, right? Whether it is formal leadership opportunities, even the kids who don't necessarily have formal roles in a regular year, there'll be kids who come and they pretty much run the Cambridge Literary Festival. I was amazed the first year I came. These 2 kids, Marcus and Prasad, they were kind of not Prasad, sorry, Marcus and Sai. They were in charge of the Cambridge Literary Fest, where we had invited some 15 other schools, I believe. And I saw this, I was walking past. There was a room where these 2 kids were standing in front, and all the teachers were seated, and these kids were kind of discussing their plan with the teachers on how, what they would like help with and how they're planning to launch this. And so I think, Manthan does a fantastic job of providing a lot of leadership opportunities. Very often it's unfortunately the students don't step up to grab those, right? So one good example is, we offer students the ability to run their own clubs. Now, not every kid can come and say, I want, and there is a selection process. The kids have to make sure they submit a plan, how they're planning to do it, what the lesson plans would be, what is the purpose of the club. But that's how the coding club was started 2 years ago by one of our seniors was graduating. 2 of our seniors were graduating this year. And they did a very good job of running the coding club. And that's how the debate club was started. So, there is, but that's it, right? There was the debate club and the coding club, and we need more kids to step up. I'm not saying every kid should come out and come and say, I'm starting a club, but yeah, we would love to hear from kids with ideas, right?
Ramya, can I just add?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, a lot of times as leadership, we think the final execution, like becoming student council members or running clubs or doing NGO work and stuff like that. But it all starts in a very early years in terms of building a certain set of attitudes, skills, a certain set of behavior in children. Like what leaders require is in terms of good communication skills, having a certain empathy towards people, right? Having a certain sense of confidence about himself, having a good value system. So all of these attitudes, behavior, skills are ingrained from very young age, as young as junior KG. So only when these things happen day in, day out in every classroom, then the final output is what we see when they come into high school and organizing and doing and, excelling at several competitions, in literary competitions or dance competitions or music or so on and so forth. But a lot of the work, actually groundwork, starts much, much earlier in very young years. And that happens every day, actually. Yeah, Ramya.
Yes. No, I agree. I think, it is something that's as much also, it needs to be, it also needs to be encouraged both, at home and in school. I think I think independence and self-sufficiency is the start to great leadership, right? And I think that should be the focus in these younger years too. Okay, let's see. So, do some Indian universities accept SAT scores as an alternative to JEE? Yes, not just for IGCSE students. There are some who do. Somewhere around 10th grade, we usually share this list of universities that accept SAT scores for entrance or for, like Shiv Nadar University is an example. They accept SAT scores for their engineering programs also. And then there are a whole bunch of others, which I have the list. It's escaping my mind, but actually for engineering, fewer, I will say. It's more so for the humanities and pure sciences and non-engineering disciplines, really. Yes, and then we also in 10th grade, the very following question is that we also in 10th grade they're asking if there are universities that don't need JEE and only their own tests. Yeah, there is. We also share in 10th grade when we do so in 10th grade, we do a parent orientation on subject selections for 11th grade, and we also do the same orientation with students. And the handout we give is one small version of today's presentation where we talk about the costs and the, a little bit about the scholarships and things like that. We also give a handout on Indian universities accepting SATs. And there's a handout on Indian engineering colleges that don't use JEE, that have their own entrance exams. So, Manipal, VIT, Amrita, they all actually have their own entrance exams. Shivnadar, if you don't want to give the SAT, they have the SNU SAT. So there are options like that. Job opportunities after doing UG in the US for Indian students. I think we touched upon this a little bit, right? Is it possible to cover Indian universities in a separate section? Yeah, typically, last year I did do Indian universities in a separate section, and as well as studying medicine in India and studying engineering in India. And medicine especially, it's kind of really, it's fairly complex, studying for NEET seems like, that is the one thing that you guys can focus on, but then the counseling part becomes really tricky. But yeah, we do those sessions, and I don't even know, I can't get a sense of how many today are parents and how many students, because at the beginning when I was asking, there were a lot of kids. So if there's interest from parents as well, we can do those sessions for parents too, because typically we plan those sessions for 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. during the week. I will definitely share it with you all, whoever are parents here. Please do join when you can. And in addition, starting in June, July, throughout the year, we have a lot of university visits as well. So please do come and join. Last year, for example, one of the disappointing things for me personally is that, last year we had, for example, Manipal came to school, and it's by far like the most sought after private engineering college in India, other than BITS. But 25 people showed up, like even among kids who always tell me, oh, I want to do engineering, I want to do engineering. From 9th grade through 12th grade, 25 kids showed up. And so I have to really wonder, are we doing something wrong, or is it? And they didn't have any other commitments that day, because I usually check with the teachers and we have a proper centralized timetable. But encourage your children to attend. I know we're all having digital fatigue, but it's really helpful, because the person did a really good job explaining the different branches of engineering and talking about Manipal's offerings and things like that, and the ICAS program. And so, especially if you're in 10th, 11th, definitely in 12th. But 10th and 11th, I feel like 10th especially is a crucial year to kind of get to know some of these programs so you can make better choices for 11th and 12th. Sorry, there's a clarification for you. OCI foreign nationals starting next year in Indian universities. Submitted with G. Are you talking about, Mr. Pradeep? Are you talking about like IITs, NITs, and stuff, or all engineering colleges? Yeah, IITs, you've always needed JEE mains, whether you were a foreign national or NRI. They never accepted SAT scores. For a long time, there was a scheme called DASA, which is Direct Admissions of Students Abroad, and that was used for a long time by IIITs, NITs. By IIITs and NITs and some of the other public institutions. It was used for, so you had to take the SAT subject test, but they did away with that starting this year. So you have to take the JEE mains. The only institution that's still considering, like among the popular ones that's still considering SAT subject tests and stuff, is BITS. But I don't know they also how much they have, they are changing. So yeah, I think that's okay. So that brings us to the end of our 23 students who have joined undergraduate courses. Are they interested in jobs after completion? I don't know. It can change, right? I think, definitely I think the ones who are, so I don't know. It's a hard question to answer, because I think, in 12th grade, what would they know about, really what they're interested in, right? And they've all gone in for courses where, it's either been predominantly like economics or business or engineering or one of the STEM fields. So I think they would be employable even after undergraduate. One of them is going for medicine after undergrad, so that student's path is clear. And then the one who's going for engineering, I think the not one the person who's in VIT, I think most probably that student will end up working. So it depends. I mean, it's hard to say. All right. Thank you so much. And I will, great. We didn't overstep on time. And if I missed any questions, I apologize. I think please do send me an email. And current eighth graders, I know I don't engage that much with you guys, but things like the summer programs and opportunities, I will ask Shailaja ma'am to, possibly share those with you, because some of those programs are for eighth grade and up. In the past, we have shared them with eighth graders. So I will share that. But otherwise, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for coming. And yeah, I'm available at careercounselor@manthanschool.org. So you can always reach out if you have. Typically, parent meetings and all, I start only in really 10th grade, because otherwise it really becomes, it becomes a problem, because I spend a lot of time with 11th and 12th graders, especially 12th grade, doing the nitty-gritties of their application process. So but I'm available by email if you guys have queries. Thank you so much, everyone.